Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah the Almighty says in the Quran, when are greeted with a greeting, respond with one better than it. So, let us begin today's discussion. Why forgiveness is a pathway to inner peace. Since this is a very large piece, I'll create it in well-structured sections so it's easy to follow and covers everything deeply. Here's the structure I'll use. 1. Introduction. 2. The nature of forgiveness. 3. Forgiveness in psychology. 4. Forgiveness in spirituality and religion. 5. The connection between forgiveness and inner peace. 6. Barriers to forgiveness. 7. Practical steps to cultivate forgiveness. 8. Forgiveness in relationships. 9. Forgiveness in society and global conflicts. 10. Personal stories and case studies. 11. Scientific studies on forgiveness and well-being. 12. Forgiveness and mental health. 13. Forgiveness and physical health. 14. The role of self-forgiveness. 15. Forgiveness versus reconciliation. 16. How forgiveness transforms anger and resentment. 17. Forgiveness in leadership and workplaces. 18. Forgiveness as a lifelong practice. 19. Common myths about forgiveness. 20. Conclusion. Forgiveness as the key to lasting inner peace. Why forgiveness is a pathway to inner peace. Introduction. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful, yet most misunderstood, human virtues. From childhood, we are often told to forgive and forget, but in reality, forgiveness is neither simple nor forgettable. It is a profound process of letting go of resentment, anger, and the desire for revenge, and replacing those emotions with compassion, empathy, and understanding. At its core, forgiveness is not about excusing harmful behavior or minimizing the pain one has suffered. Instead, it is about releasing ourselves from the heavy burden of negative emotions that chain us to the past. Inner peace, on the other hand, is a state of balance, calm, and harmony within the self. It does not mean that life is free from problems or challenges, but rather that an individual is able to approach difficulties with clarity, patience, and emotional stability. True inner peace is not found in material possessions, external achievements, or temporary pleasures. It is cultivated through the way we manage our minds, hearts, and relationships. The pathway between forgiveness and inner peace lies in the liberation that forgiveness brings. When we forgive, we choose to loosen the grip of bitterness that corrodes our mental and emotional health. Anger, grudges, and hatred drain our energy, distort our worldview, and prevent us from experiencing joy. Forgiveness is the antidote to this poison. It restores our sense of control, allows us to heal from wounds, and empowers us to move forward with a lighter heart. In this essay, we will explore forgiveness as a multidimensional practice that touches psychology, spirituality, health, and social harmony. We will examine why it is difficult for people to forgive, what science says about its benefits, and how forgiveness influences both personal well-being and collective peace. Ultimately, we will see that forgiveness is not a weakness, but a profound strength, and it is one of the most reliable pathways to inner peace. 2. The nature of forgiveness. Forgiveness is often mistaken for a single act, a quick decision to let go of pain. In truth, forgiveness is a complex and layered process that involves both the mind and the heart. To truly understand why forgiveness leads to inner peace, we must first grasp what forgiveness actually is and what it is not. 2.1 Forgiveness defined. At its simplest, forgiveness can be defined as the conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment, vengeance, or hostility towards someone who has wronged us, regardless of whether they deserve forgiveness or not. It is a voluntary act, meaning no one can force an individual to forgive. It must arise from within. Psychologists describe forgiveness as a shift from negative emotions, such as anger, hate, or bitterness, toward more positive emotions such as empathy, compassion, and love. Importantly, forgiveness is not about condoning harmful actions or denying that pain was caused. It is not weakness or surrender. Instead, it is strength, the ability to rise above the wrongdoing and choose freedom from the grip of negativity. 2.2 Forgiveness versus forgetting. One of the greatest misconceptions about forgiveness is that it requires forgetting the offense. In reality, forgiveness does not erase memory. Painful events often remain with us, sometimes permanently. What changes through forgiveness is not the memory, but the emotional charge that memory holds. By forgiving, we strip the memory of its power to control us. Think of it like carrying a heavy stone in your pocket. Every day, the stone weighs you down, reminding you of your suffering. Forgiveness does not remove the fact that the stone exists, it simply allows you to put it down so you can walk freely without its burden. 2.3 Forgiveness as a process. Forgiveness is rarely instant. It unfolds in stages. For some, it begins with a conscious decision to want to forgive. For others, it starts with empathy, an attempt to understand the humanity of the offender. Often, it requires revisiting the pain multiple times, processing it, and gradually releasing the grip of negative emotions. Scholars and therapists often describe forgiveness as involving 1. Acknowledgement of the hurt, recognizing the pain and injustice caused. 2. Decision to forgive, choosing, consciously, not to let the wrong define one's inner life. 3. Emotional release, allowing anger, hatred, and resentment to fade over time. 4. Renewed perspective, seeing both oneself and the offender through the lens of compassion and growth. 2.4 Forgiveness of others versus self-forgiveness. While we often think of forgiveness in terms of others, many people struggle most with forgiving themselves. Guilt, shame, and regret can be far heavier than anger toward others. Self-forgiveness requires courage to accept mistakes, learn from them, and release the self-condemnation that hinders growth. Both self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others are essential for inner peace. 2.5 Forgiveness as liberation. Ultimately, forgiveness is about liberation. When we forgive, we are not necessarily setting the offender free, we are setting ourselves free. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Forgiveness removes that poison, creating space for healing, joy, and peace of mind. 3. Forgiveness in psychology. Modern psychology has devoted considerable attention to forgiveness, especially in the past few decades. What was once considered primarily a religious or moral issue is now recognized as a vital component of emotional health. Psychologists study forgiveness not only as a personal virtue but also as a therapeutic tool that can transform lives. 3.1 Forgiveness as emotional healing. From a psychological perspective, forgiveness functions as an essential form of emotional healing. When someone has been deeply hurt, betrayed, or humiliated, their brain naturally responds with stress and defense mechanisms. Anger and resentment often surface as protective emotions. However, when these emotions linger for long periods, they can become toxic. Chronic resentment is associated with depression, anxiety, hostility, and even physical health issues like high blood pressure. Forgiveness interrupts this cycle. By forgiving, individuals consciously decide to let go of destructive emotions and replace them with healthier responses. This does not mean suppressing pain, rather, it involves processing the hurt in a constructive way that leads to release. 3.2 The role of empathy in forgiveness. One of the most powerful psychological tools in forgiveness is empathy. Empathy is the ability to put oneself in another's shoes and understand their perspective, even when they have caused harm. Research shows that when people cultivate empathy toward offenders, forgiveness becomes easier. This does not mean justifying harmful actions. Instead, empathy recognizes the complexity of human behavior, that people act out of fear, ignorance, weakness, or past wounds. Understanding this complexity can transform hatred into compassion, and compassion is a gateway to forgiveness. 3.3 Forgiveness Therapy. Psychologists have developed structured therapeutic approaches to help individuals forgive. Forgiveness therapy has been shown to reduce symptoms of depression, PTSD, and anxiety. It involves guiding clients through stages such as acknowledging the hurt without denial, reframing the offender's actions through empathy and understanding, making a conscious choice to forgive for one's own well-being, rebuilding self-esteem after the wound. Dr. Robert Enright, one of the pioneers in forgiveness research, developed the Enright forgiveness process model, which has been used worldwide to help victims of abuse, war, and trauma heal through forgiveness. 3.4 Forgiveness and Mental Health. Studies consistently reveal that forgiveness has profound mental health benefits. People who practice forgiveness report lower levels of anger, depression, and anxiety, higher levels of life satisfaction, happiness, and hope, improved relationships and social connections, greater ability to cope with stress and adversity. Forgiveness essentially acts as a psychological reset button. Instead of being imprisoned by the past, individuals open themselves to a healthier, more hopeful future. 3.5 Unforgiveness as a psychological burden. Conversely, holding grudges can be psychologically damaging. Resentment is like a wound that never heals because the mind constantly reopens it. This creates what psychologists call rumination, the repetitive cycle of negative thoughts that reinforces pain. Rumination can lead to insomnia, chronic stress, irritability, and strained relationships. When people choose forgiveness, they break free from rumination. Instead of rehearsing pain, they shift focus toward healing and growth. 3.6 Forgiveness and Resilience. Forgiveness also enhances resilience, the ability to recover from difficulties. Life inevitably brings betrayal, disappointment, and conflict. People who forgive adapt better to these challenges, because forgiveness prevents emotional wounds from festering into permanent scars. By letting go, they preserve energy for building new experiences instead of clinging to old pain. 4. Forgiveness in spirituality and religion. Forgiveness has been at the heart of spiritual traditions and religious teachings for thousands of years. Long before modern psychology began to study its benefits, sages, prophets, and spiritual leaders emphasized forgiveness as a path to peace, both in this life and the next. Across cultures, forgiveness is seen not only as a moral duty but also as a spiritual practice that purifies the heart and draws one closer to the divine. 4.1 Forgiveness in Christianity. Christianity places forgiveness at the very core of faith. Jesus Christ's teachings in the New Testament emphasize mercy, compassion, and love toward enemies. One of the most famous prayers, the Lord's Prayer, includes the plea, "Forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors." For Christians, forgiveness is not optional but essential. Jesus' act of forgiving even those who crucified him, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," is considered the ultimate model of compassion. Believers are encouraged to forgive 70 times 7, symbolizing endless mercy. The Christian tradition teaches that forgiveness is not just for the benefit of others but also for the salvation of one's own soul. By forgiving, Christians align themselves with God's nature of love and grace. 4.2 Forgiveness in Islam. Islam also emphasizes forgiveness as a divine attribute and a human responsibility. The Quran describes God, Allah, as Al-Ghafar, the most forgiving, and Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. Muslims are encouraged to embody these qualities by forgiving others. One verse states, "Let them pardon and forgive." Do you not love that Allah should forgive you? And Allah is forgiving, merciful. Quran 2400 hours 22. This verse highlights the reciprocal nature of forgiveness. By forgiving others, believers invite God's forgiveness upon themselves. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, exemplified forgiveness throughout his life. Even when he was insulted, attacked, or betrayed, he responded with patience and mercy. His forgiveness of the people of Mecca after years of persecution remains one of the most profound examples of compassion in Islamic history. 4.3 Forgiveness in Judaism. In Judaism, forgiveness, selika, is deeply connected to justice, repentance, and reconciliation. The Jewish tradition recognizes that humans are imperfect and often fail. Therefore, forgiveness plays a central role in religious life, particularly during Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. On Yom Kippur, Jews seek forgiveness from God for sins committed, but they are also required to seek forgiveness from fellow human beings whom they have wronged. Forgiveness, therefore, is both a personal and communal responsibility. It restores relationships, heals communities, and renews the covenant with God. 4.4 Forgiveness in Buddhism. In Buddhism, forgiveness is closely tied to compassion, karu, and loving-kindness, metta. The Buddha taught that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else, yet you are the one who gets burned. Forgiveness in Buddhism is not about excusing harm but about freeing the mind from hatred and resentment. Meditation practices such as loving-kindness meditation encourage practitioners to extend goodwill even toward those who have caused suffering. This act of mental release leads to inner peace and spiritual awakening. 5. The connection between forgiveness and inner peace. Inner peace is one of the most sought-after human experiences. People chase it through wealth, achievements, entertainment, or even isolation, but lasting peace does not come from external sources. It arises from within, when the mind and heart are free of turmoil. Forgiveness is one of the most direct and reliable paths to this freedom. 5.1 Why unforgiveness blocks peace. When we hold grudges, the mind becomes a battlefield. Thoughts replay the wrong, emotions fuel resentment, and the body experiences stress responses. This inner conflict prevents relaxation and joy. A person may achieve success, love, or recognition, yet still feel restless because unresolved anger gnaws at their soul. Unforgiveness also distorts perception. We may begin to view the world through a lens of suspicion, bitterness, and defensiveness. This not only affects our relationship with the offender but also with everyone else around us. In this sense, unforgiveness is like a storm cloud that overshadows the entire sky of our lives. 5.2 Forgiveness as emotional release. Forgiveness acts as an emotional release valve. Instead of allowing anger and pain to build pressure within us, forgiveness lets it flow out. This release creates space for calmness and clarity. The heart feels lighter, the mind gains perspective. Just as cleaning a wound prevents infection, forgiveness cleanses emotional wounds so they can heal without poisoning the soul. 5.3 Forgiveness and freedom. Peace is inseparable from freedom. Forgiveness grants freedom, not necessarily to the offender, but to the one who forgives. When we forgive, we declare, "You no longer have control over my emotions, my thoughts, or my future." The offender may never apologize or change, but by forgiving, we reclaim our inner power. This freedom makes peace sustainable. Without forgiveness, even years after an offense, anger can resurface at the smallest trigger. With forgiveness, those memories lose their sharp edge, allowing us to live in the present rather than being chained to the past. 5.4 Forgiveness and compassion. Another reason forgiveness leads to inner peace is its connection to compassion. When we forgive, we often begin to see not only our own pain but also the brokenness of the one who caused harm. This shift from judgment to compassion dissolves hostility and nurtures understanding. Compassion softens the heart, turning potential enemies into reminders of shared humanity. Peace naturally flows from such compassion. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.